Phil. Welcome back to the show. I am here with Christian Taylor.
Hey, I get top billing today. Hi.
Who is pretty in aqua?
I called this...
Aquamarine?
I call it Robin's Egg Blue.
Oh, yeah, Robin's Egg Blue. Okay, and it's like everything. His necklace is Robin's
This
Egg.
came from France.
Oh, the French underwear. Is that one of the hot Parisian colors this year?
Yeah.
Straight from the runways of Paris, it's Christian
The
Taylor.
fashionista Christian Taylor.
Yeah. And Sky Jitani.
Hi.
Black.
This came from Sri Lanka.
Straight from the
Did it really?
sweatshops
Probably.
of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Straight from the collapsing buildings of Bangladesh. It's
Something's wrong with Taco.
Taco the Bell is under the weather.
He's not very loud.
He's
I don't
quiet.
Know. I don't know
That's
what's
so
wrong.
sad.
Feeling thoughtful.
He's a taquito.
Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky
Hi.
He's preoccupied with his phone.
I'm going to figure out what's wrong with Taco.
and Christian.
He doesn't care about your song.
No,
Hi.
he doesn't. But we got no guest, not today for you. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
That is totally off key.
No, it was. I was harmonizing with myself.
Oh, okay. All right, then that's fine.
Now I have to go back and do the other part.
Sorry.
While your ringtone
Who's
works.
that?
I'm turning up my ringtone.
Who's that?
That's nobody. That's
That
my
was you?
ringtone.
Who's calling?
Hey.
Aha.
Hey.
Taco is back.
Taco's
So
back.
did you see the Big Dinosaur movie?
Jurassic World?
Yeah.
I have not yet.
You have not seen it.
Have you?
And Sky has not seen it.
No.
No, and you're trying to decide if you can take your kids.
Well, I may have made a parental error yesterday.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So my 10-year-old son really wants to see the movie, and I thought, well, before
Yeah.
if we're going to see that, then you should really see the original Jurassic Park. So we rented it last night. All the kids are watching it, and you know, the first half of the movie.
And
there's
the 10-year-old is not your youngest.
No.
Your youngest is how old?
7.
7.
But she's pretty tough.
Yeah, she's a tough cookie.
She's a
Okay.
tough girl. And we got to that right about the middle of the movie is when the T-Rex kind of
And the kids in the car upside down.
right and
In the rain?
and my wife looked at me like, you are a horrible parent. What are you doing to our children? And so we had to stop the movie, and I kind of looked at my son and gave him that look like, yeah, we're going to do this later. Don't worry.
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink. But now
Well, did the kids
But he
not
was
want to
okay.
watch it? Were they scared?
Well, the younger one really wanted to because she wants to do everything her older brother does, and she
Yeah.
really wants to go see the new one in the theater, but it's because the older one's doing it. So I don't know if I'm just forcing her along too quickly here.
well, what? Well,
Was
were they
Isaac
upset?
okay with it?
Yeah, he's fine with it.
Were
was
they
okay.
upset
Okay,
that
so
you
he'll
had
be
to take it
okay.
off?
No, but I mean, Isaac was. He wanted to keep watching, but it was getting late. It was fine. But I have this bad habit of thinking my children are ready to handle things they're not ready to handle.
Good thing you have Amanda.
Yes, that's why it takes two.
Right.
But I grew up in a home where, like, probably by the time I could walk, my dad was insisting that I watch James Bond movies so that I could learn about the world.
And how to relate to women.
Yeah, that's where I learned all
Right.
about.
That's why my dad
And-
raised me with Benny Hill. If you know
Wow.
who Benny Hill is.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course I do.
Yeah, that's what my dad
That's what
liked.
happened to you.
Okay, so anyway,
So I haven't seen the new one yet.
you haven't seen the new one. Well, then you should take Isaac, at least.
It's PG-13, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
Was
I
it
think
as
so.
scary as the original Jurassic Park?
I don't know, because I was such a different age when I saw the original. It was definitely intense, and we saw it for my birthday. Happy birthday to Phil. We saw it for my birthday.
Are you 49?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
I'm 49, which I like because it's a square root.
That
you
means
know?
49
It's
is coming for
7
me.
squared, so that's fun. Yeah, you're next. And all 3 of my kids were there, and so we went and saw it IMAX, and we brought my mom,
Oh,
who's older than I am.
Right.
Did she like it?
She found it a little intense and a little loud, and in IMAX it was quite loud.
Yeah, I imagine.
You couldn't even talk. We couldn't even talk to each other during the credit music when it was over. That's how loud.
Even the credit music was
Yes, the credit music was
loud?
louder.
Did they do the
than,
classic theme?
it
the
came
John
up.
Williams
The
score?
classic theme came up, yeah,
Okay.
and John Williams was credited for creating the original score.
Because that classic theme it's not the kind of monster movie theme you would expect. It's very melodic.
No,
and-
yeah, they work it in though.
Yeah.
I'm a dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur.
It has words?
Rar, rar, rar.
No.
that's the way the kids sing it. That's the way the hipsters sing it nowadays. It's big. It's loud. It feels like the original one, if the original one was sponsored by Taco Bell.
What does that mean?
It just feels more commercial.
More fake?
And kind of cheaper.
Pretty much
or kind of dumbed down.
Like everything in 2015.
Yes, like America, the difference between 20 years ago and today. First of all, there's tons of corporate sponsorships. There's Starbucks in the background. Margaritaville is in the background. There's a.
I heard Jimmy Buffett's actually in the movie.
I heard he's in the movie
when
too,
they're
yeah.
running, he grabs a margarita or something.
Yeah, something like that. There's a Mercedes-Benz logo in probably a third of the shots.
Wow.
You know, every time a car drives, it's a Mercedes-Benz, and the camera catches the front grille, so you can see the logo. So there's just so much product placement. It's big, it's exciting, it's loud.
What about the story?
Were there a lot of Chinese people?
story?
Yeah, story.
Dinosaurs get out.
So it's
always
the same story.
How do you? I mean, they're bigger, better dinosaurs, right? But
Yeah. And,
Is there any good character development?
No.
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 Is there any good humor?
Some, I guess.
How about the language and the
language
inappropriate
is
stuff?
okay to keep it PG-13. You know, they wanted the kids to come, so it's relatively appropriate. There's no, no one's running around naked.
Do you see blood?
Yes, you do see blood. In fact, you see blood splattered on windows and stuff like that. And there's just some weird killings of people that, as someone pointed out in one of the reviews, that there's a couple of killings that don't seem to match, like that the person deserved that kind of death. Typically when there's a particular, we're going to keep this on screen for a long time and really watch this person get what they have coming to them, it's someone that you actually want that to happen to.
that's what the original movie really did well.
And they didn't do that.
None of the good guys die in the original. It's all the bad guys.
Right. So there's just some kind of ambiguous people that are neither good nor bad. In fact, almost everyone in it is kind of ambiguous, neither good nor bad, but most of them, are side characters, and so they end up dying.
Well, truthfully,
anyway.
dinosaurs really don't care if you're good or
Dinosaurs
bad.
are not morally discerning.
Right.
If there's anything I've learned about dinosaurs in my 49 years, it's that they're not morally discerning.
Including
Correct.
Barney. He was a
But
fiend.
when I was a kid, filmmakers were.
True.
I'm just going to let that rest there. Ponder.
Well, good. Can we
Yeah.
move on to
Yes,
presents that I have to give?
We have presents.
Yes.
We have
okay.
presents from Kristen.
So Michelle Phoenix is a local listener, and she enjoys our podcast. I think she's listened to them all, and she sent us some presents.
No way.
Yes, she did.
That's
So
fantastic.
at some point, I mentioned about having my own T-shirt called Simply Christian.
If you're watching this at home, you can see the T-shirt. If you're not
it
watching
says
it
Simply
at home,
Christian, the
it
Phil
says Simply
Vischer
Christian
podcast.
It's a T-shirt
Yeah.
that says Simply Christian
and it has
on it.
frilly furlies on it.
And I
Here,
love it.
I'll hold it up on
Okay.
my camera.
is this becoming a weekly segment where we have
Simply
gift
Christian.
exchanges?
Yeah,
I don't know,
it's
maybe.
Christmas. Every week is Christmas on the Phil Vischer podcast.
And then
Okay.
she sent you big
That's cool.
Turk chocolate bars, which I think is Turkish Delight. She said we talked about it
Turkish
at some
Delight,
point.
yeah.
Right?
I've had Turkish Delight in
Turk.
Turkey.
But is this
Really?
really Turkish Delight?
It says
or is
Turkish
this just
Delight.
something that
It-
says it's Turkish
says-
Delight?
no, it's-
See, it says Turkish Delight.
It is Turkish Delight.
But I thought Turkish Delight
just
was like
chocolate?
a jelly product with powdered sugar around it.
Well, I'm sure there's different kinds. This one just has chocolate around it, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was quite, I will tell you that my children took a bite of it and were like, ugh. But I ate one.
Which means
and-
your children are more discerning than you are.
It wasn't
apparently.
terrible.
The ingredients are sugar, glucose, modified cornstarch, cocoa butter, milk ingredients, cocoa mass, artificial flavors, color, citric acid. That's like any candy bar.
Yeah.
It's like the exact same
That's
ingredients. So what makes it Turkish?
Good
It's
question.
a Big Turk.
Interesting.
Better than Big Turd.
It has 60% less fat
Yes,
than
it
the
is.
average chocolate bar. That's what's Turkish.
Maybe I'll have that for lunch.
The Turks suck out the fat.
Michelle has also written a book
Oh.
that she sent us.
What is it?
So this book is called In Broken Places. It's a novel, and it's about a woman born in France to American mother and a. Oh no, that's actually Michelle. I don't have my glasses
You're reading
on.
her bio. You want me to read the
Yeah,
back?
sure, please. I can't.
Shelby's life isn't glamorous, but it is predictable. and that's the way she likes it. A survivor of her father's violence, she has spent years creating a safe existence devoid of dependence, but her carefully managed life begins to crack when she becomes legal guardian to Shayla, a 4-year-old carrying a secret that shatters her world. In a dramatic attempt to escape her past, Shelby accepts a teaching position in Germany, hoping for a fresh start. But as she tries to adjust to a new job, a new culture, a new daughter, and the ardent pursuit of a persistent basketball coach, Shelby begins to wonder if she made the right choice or if the past will continue to threaten the future she desires.
Dun, 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 dun.
I'm opening some Turkish Delight.
Okay.
I
Anyway,
gotta
yes.
check
So,
it out.
Michelle, thank you very much. I wish you
Thanks,
all the
Michelle.
best with your
Thanks,
novel.
Michelle.
And thank you
Thanks.
so much for my T-shirt and the chocolate.
And
We
the-
love gifts.
The delight of the Turks. Is there a little Turk? Because this is a big Turk.
That is a big Turk.
This is a big Turk.
They may make a little like
Is there
bite-sized size.
A little Turk. I would like to see.
I think you just have to bite it, man.
Oh,
Yeah, you do. It's
like-
You
rubbery.
can't pull it apart.
Wow, you can't pull it apart. It's got rubber on the inside.
Just bite it. Come on,
It's
I want to
actually
see
a
what you
prop.
think.
Wow. It's chewy. It's like kind of gummy bear on the inside.
It's like a gummy bear with
Is
chocolate
it
around
made
it.
from recycled gummy bears?
It's gummy Turk.
Gummy Turk.
E.
Do you like Turkish Delight?
I liked it in Turkey.
How do I know that this is really Turkish Delight?
Because it says
That
so on the
this
package.
is what they were talking about in Narnia.
Well, we'd have to ask C.S. Lewis, but he's no longer with us.
No, he's not. Okay,
All right. So anyway,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for the gifts. Keep sending in your gifts, everyone.
we
This
love
is
them.
What keeps us going is free stuff. So, the other movie that I'm really excited about, though, first Pixar movie in 2 years,
Inside Out.
Inside Out.
Does that have to do with emotions?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't really know anything.
It's all about emotions.
Okay, so give me like the tagline or the through line.
I don't know what the tag. It's.
I know the plot.
It's set in the head of an 11-year-old girl.
Okay.
Which
So,
itself should be a drama more than a comedy.
Say no more. Say no more. That's enough for.
Actually, the worst part about a girl would be around 13, so it's sort of
that's
like
where
the
we are.
it's getting extraordinarily good reviews.
I knew the moment I found out that Lewis Black voices anger
Yes.
that I was going to see this movie.
Really, that's
yeah.
all it took.
I bet
That's
he
all
was
it took.
fantastic.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm longing to.
So it opens. We're recording.
We should
this
all
on
three
Friday.
go to see it
opens
together.
today.
That would be fun.
I do intend to see it soon. What's interesting, though, is you look at that movie, if you've seen the previews, you say, oh, a cute cartoon for my kids, a cute cartoon for my kids. It's colorful and happy. And then you look at previews for Jurassic World, and you say, that's huge. That's a massive production. Huge, epic. I got to go see that on IMAX. The funny thing is, Inside Out cost more to make than Jurassic World.
What? How is that possible?
Jurassic World cost $150 million. Inside Out cost $170 million.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Was that because it took so long? Because I heard it went through
Part-
years and years of
Partly,
rewrites.
but most Pixar films now are in the $150 million range.
Wow.
So and that's I think the trouble that animated films are in right now is that they don't look as expensive as they really are. That you don't see because there's so many. Particularly when DreamWorks started cranking out 3 a year, they just started looking like another cartoon. Oh, another cartoon for the kids. But then, Avengers: Age of Ultron comes out, and you say, "Wow, that's a huge movie! I gotta go
which
check
is essentially
that
a
out."
computer animated movie too.
I know they're both the same thing, basically.
Right.
That's just that they point a camera at people standing in front of green, and they put them into the cartoon, and you get Age of Ultron.
Right.
And with Jurassic World, they built lots of sets, and and then they put animated characters into it with humans. But
Who knew that Roger Rabbit was going to be the future of movies?
Yeah, who knew?
Roger Rabbit is
Remember
the
that?
future. Yeah. Well, yeah, I saw Roger Rabbit twice the first 2 days it was out.
Was Roger
I
Rabbit
went back the
before
next day and
Space
saw it
Jam?
again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it was. Yeah, that kind of started that. Oh, my wife is sending me messages. That's fun. So anyway, I'm worried about Pixar and DreamWorks and those animated producers because they're spending more than you have to spend for a blockbuster tentpole style film, but they've become so common that people don't put that much value on them.
They don't go flock to see them like they do a Jurassic World.
No. So Inside Out, it's not going to do what Jurassic World did, but it costs more.
I've heard that some reviews I've read or heard said that this is going to be a enduring classic.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
that good.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm sure when you take into account everything else that comes after the official movie release, it does eventually make enough back to make it to justify.
But the real
Not necessarily. Like 3 of DreamWorks' last 4 movies did not make their money back.
the real
So
question is
DreamWorks is in trouble.
how will Inside Out play in China?
I don't know that it's
Do
going to
they-
go great in China.
I don't know.
Really?
either.
The
'Cause it
interior
doesn't-
life of an 11-year-old American girl
Would be different.
No, I think that might be different enough.
Yeah.
But maybe that new movie Meg that I told you about earlier
Yeah.
will do a lot better in China.
Because they moved it to
Yeah,
China.
there was a movie called
Megalodon. It's
yeah, it was a
about
megalodon shark
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
like totally tanked in America until somebody decided, hey, let's put it in China.
Let's make it a Chinese shark.
Right.
Then we've got an audience. Bada boom, bada bing. And I think it's gonna be harder to make movies that are distinctly from an American cultural point of view or about an uniquely American experience unless you keep the budgets way, way down, which is true of European films. You know, European films, they know they have to.
Well, in China, are there just more people to go
Yes.
see the movies? And that's what, well, I know there's more people, but is it basically simply a numbers game? It's a numbers game, and so they make more money over there because of that? Or
They don't make more money over there like Jurassic World. And the first weekend was 200 million U.S., 100 million China. It's that's a new 100 million that they've suddenly found. And certain kinds of movies, particularly broader action films, you know, like Fast and Furious, just people doing crazy mayhem stuff,
Right.
are now doing much better internationally than in the U.S.
Right.
Because we tend.
are we saturated?
Because violence is the international language of movies.
Because they travel better. They travel better. But if it's a romantic comedy with
It's more subtle
with
language
Diane Keaton
stuff, yeah.
and Jack Nicholson playing aging New Yorkers falling in
Right.
love, that doesn't play very well in
Right.
in Hong Kong.
They
It
don't know
just-
how to deal with older women in pantsuits.
Okay.
So what are we really talking
The
about
world
today?
is changing. I told you last week that we ran out of time because we had to do the
Right.
history of Hollywood. We ran out of time to talk about the topic, which was dum dum dum. Have you heard of it? Same-sex marriage. It's new.
I thought we were done with this topic.
It's new. It's sweeping the world.
Haven't we talked about this enough?
Yes.
The latest trend in marriage.
I thought our listeners have said they don't want any more of this.
No, they've listed numerous topics that they don't want any more of, and so I give them a break for a couple weeks, and then I stick it to them again. More atheists.
Well, the problem is there's more
gays.
news, I guess.
More news. Yes, there is more news. So Ireland. I want to talk about Ireland and then 3 Christian leaders in Ireland to show kind of how much the world is changing. And then 3 Christian leaders who have made responses to same-sex marriage in the last 2 weeks that show a diversity of how to respond.
I'm afraid that doesn't sound good.
Ooh, fun.
Okay. Here we go.
Ireland, of course, voted to legalize gay marriage.
Correct.
As a national referendum. It's one of only 2 or 3 countries that have done that.
It seemed
Yeah.
a lot easier for them than the United States.
Yeah,
because it's
it's little.
the U.S. has primarily pushed this through the courts, whereas in Ireland it's a democratic vote,
Right.
Which is what makes it so remarkable, is that it was popularly decided by the Irish rather than
Right.
just a court decision.
Ireland's newspapers said that the country had dramatically changed and confirmed its emergence from the shadow of the traditionally powerful Catholic Church. So the way that many people are spinning this is Ireland is finally free of the authority of the Catholic Church. The Sunday Independent, and what I think is interesting about how the Irish papers wrote about it is there's a level of, I would say, hyperbole being used, which is kind of interesting. The Sunday Independent said, Ireland, I should talk Irish.
Yes, do
with
that.
it. Ireland has changed utterly in the voice of its young people who have declared as one that nothing will ever be the same again.
Wow.
What did you say? That's
It
hyperbolic?
kind of was like the end of
The
Western
accent or the words?
the end of Western civilization, but just in a different way.
Now that we have same-sex marriage, nothing will ever be the same again. Donuts will taste differently. Irish beer will be a different color. The roads will be on the ceiling. What kind of... Isn't that a little hyperbolic? Nothing will ever be the same again. Me Lucky Charms don't have clovers anymore. Because of the gays.
I don't think it's nothing will
There's
ever be
plenty of rainbows.
I don't think it's nothing will ever be the same again because now there's legal gay marriage. I think it's nothing will ever be the same again because this vote represented the throwing off of the Roman Catholic influence on the country.
That doesn't mean nothing.
Well, come on. People get excited in these kinds of things and they say stuff.
The Irish Sun said, Ireland officially emerged from the shadows of the Catholic Church yesterday to show its love and respect to people who have suffered here for centuries. Okay, that's okay. Have gays really suffered for centuries in the hands of the Irish? Have the Irish been beating up gays for... Okay, maybe.
Could be. We don't know. We don't live there.
Possibly. The Irish Sunday Mirror said, a no vote. This one was the kicker. The Irish Sunday Mirror said, a no vote would have reinforced tired stereotypes of a small-minded, God-fearing Catholic country. But the result knocked this notion out of the park. So the last thing they wanted to be thought of was a God-fearing country.
A small-minded.
Does that mean be okay if they were big-minded, God-fearing leprechauns? Mm-hmm. Then that's different?
Stop calling the Irish leprechauns.
I didn't, just that one time.
Well, don't do it again.
Leprechauns aren't small-minded, they're just small.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So...
True.
Okay. So they considered it progress to say, just so that everyone knows, we are not God-fearing.
Well, some people are going to think that's progress.
Yay!
Okay, but I think there's an important... I wrote a piece about this a couple weeks ago.
What'd you say?
Did you?
Yeah.
What did you write?
Oh, it was more about what can America learn from what happened in this? Because here's the funny thing, is when you look at what Ireland had up to this point in its relationship between the culture and the church, it's pretty much everything that the religious right in America desperately wants.
Which is?
So I'll give you some examples.
What they had. Okay, yes.
So for example,
the old Ireland.
Old Ireland.
Oh, the old Ireland.
And Ireland today still. So the American Constitution, for example, is a completely secular document.
Aye.
There's zero mention of God, zero mention of anything Christian, certainly. It's a completely secular document. This is the opening line of the Constitution of Ireland. It says, in the name of the most holy Trinity, from whom is all authority, ... And then the Constitution goes on to speak of Ireland's, quote, obligations to our divine Lord Jesus Christ.
Wow.
A completely...
That's not very secular.
Christian document, okay? Then 90% of the schools in Ireland are run by the Roman Catholic Church, which means the church has massive influence over the entire educational system, including prayers, in Ireland. So,
and they still couldn't keep kids from growing up pro-gay marriage.
That's my point, is when you look at Ireland, on paper, it seems to have this enmeshment between state and religion, between the church and the culture, that American Christians
like what America was originally founded to be.
Well, what some people think, but my point
that is not what America was founded to be.
It's like what Massachusetts was originally founded to be.
So here's the question, though. Imagine like an extremely partisan right-wing Christian advocate who
I can't even picture one of those.
Who wants God and country.
Where would I find them?
Who wants prayer in schools. Who wants prayer in school. Who wants, an explicitly Christian view of whatever it is.
Yes, who wants God in the Constitution.
Does that mean that we are actually going to become a more Christian country in spirit and in our values? Well, when you look at Ireland, it's the exact opposite has happened. So I just think it's an interesting lesson to be learned, that maybe you should be careful what you want or wish for, because it isn't going to be the solution you think it is.
Fascinating. Okay, so that happened in Ireland. It shows that the world is in fact changing. What was interesting, the case of the baker in Ireland. Have you heard the one about the Irish cake baker? He got into a boat with a Jamaican
candlestick maker,
pearl diver. No, an Irish cake baker was sued because, as part of this run-up to the election, someone, a gay rights activist, asked them to bake a cake and to write on it gay marriage equality or something like that. So
that's kind of like what happened in America.
Except he didn't want to make a cake for a gay wedding. It wasn't about the message on the cake.
It was a political message.
It was specifically, would you bake me a cake and write something political that you don't agree with on my cake? And they said, no, we won't write that. And so they got sued, and they were found guilty. Because in here we would position that as a free speech issue, but in Ireland it isn't necessarily the same free speech or free religion ruling. It's a different constitution, so they came up as guilty. What was
a Christian constitution, ironically?
It's a Christian constitution, and in a Christian constitution, you can't just say you won't write something gay on your cake. Apparently.
Something we're experts on Irish law. I love that.
Yeah.
Kind of like we're experts on movies we've never seen.
If we had to dig up an actual expert on every topic we talk about and bring them in, we'd never get anywhere. There'd be no show. So we're doing the best we can. Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
He's an actor.
He's an actor, yes.
Engage.
He's not gay, but he's very
engaged.
Gay rights active.
He says engage.
I know.
Right.
He's
But
very
he thought you
pro.
said engaged.
He's very pro gay rights.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't know that about him, he actually came out in support of the baker. He went on record saying...
Because he likes the free speech idea.
Yes, because he has that more American sense of, well, I disagree with what he was, what he said he wouldn't say, but I think he should have the right not to say it because it was a political statement.
Right.
So if you're a Democrat, you shouldn't be required to write a Republican message on a cake that is completely a statement you don't agree with at all. So it's kind of interesting, and he took a little heat in the British press.
He did, really,
for not supporting the kind of the party line or the fashion of the day, which says, oh, you can't be opposed to anything.
It's because he's a forward-thinking man of the future.
Here in the U.S., we have a lot of Christian leaders. Did you know that?
We have a lot of Christians.
We have a lot of Christians.
And we have a lot of leaders.
And sometimes people rise to the surface as leaders of them, of different little bunches of Christians, little clots of Christians.
Clots of Christians.
Yes, that's the technical
How about
term.
a clutch of Christians?
Like a clutch of Christians?
Yeah, I like that.
That's nice, too.
A clot, though, is nice because it blocks things from moving.
Things from moving forward. We've got a clot.
And a clot can become a scab.
On
that must be
I-90.
picked.
Oh, gosh.
A clot of Christians is... Okay, so we have leaders, 3 different leaders, all that would consider themselves evangelical. So it's not like, one from way over here and one from way over here. These are 3 men that would all consider themselves evangelical and probably theologically would qualify as evangelical.
Okay.
Okay. Franklin Graham. Mm-hmm. Do you know who he is?
I've heard of him.
He's the son of Billy.
How would you like to go through your life being known as the son of?
Son of Billy. It depends on who your father was.
Could be good, could be bad.
And how many doors it opened that you wanted opened versus how many doors it opened that annoyed you. Second one is Tony Campolo. Tony,
son of?
Son of...
Mr. Campolo.
Fred Campolo.
Okay.
You're making that up.
Maybe. You don't know. And the third one is, wait a minute, Tim Keller, pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian in New York City. One of my favorite pastors, by the way.
Have you ever met him?
I have not. No.
You just listen to him?
We don't travel in the same circles. Yeah, I listen to his podcasts sometimes. Okay, so we start with Franklin Graham. And all three of these men in the last 2 weeks have chosen to speak out about same-sex marriage.
Because of Ireland?
I don't know how much Ireland had to do with it. Maybe. What if we start getting like little pro-gay messages in our Lucky Charms, like in the bottom of the box?
Have there been
a little mini cake?
What's the Irish equivalent of a fortune cookie? Maybe a message under the.
It's a shamrock.
Beer bottle.
A shamrock.
Tab?
Oh yeah, under a beer bottle cap. Yeah, or on the backside of a shamrock, etched in the tissue of shamrock.
There's a market there.
I don't know. Okay. So Franklin Graham said, all right, I got to speak out.
Was there something that happened this week in the United States regarding gay marriage? Okay.
No, they just had to. They
just randomly, all three of them.
I got to say something. I'm taking a stand.
Okay.
Well, I think he just wasn't in the news cycle for quite a while, so he had to get back in.
They each took a stand. Franklin Graham said it has dawned on him how to fight the tide of moral decay that is being crammed down our throats by big business, the media, and the gay and lesbian community. He says, every day it is something else. He posted this on his Facebook page. Every day it is something else. Tiffany's started advertising wedding rings for gay couples. Wells Fargo Bank is using a same-sex couple in their advertising. And there's more, but it has dawned on me that we don't have to do business with them. This is one way we as Christians
This
can.
just occurred to him.
It dawned on him 2 weeks ago.
The whole concept of a boycott is new to him. He's not heard of this before.
It dawned on him 2 weeks ago. This is one way we as Christians can speak out. We have the power of choice. Let's just stop doing business with those who promote sin and stand against Almighty God's laws and His standards. Maybe if enough of us do this, we will get their attention.
If you don't do business with businesses that promote sin, you basically need to go out into a desert island.
I do not agree with him. I would like to respect him and his position, but I respectfully
So he had the Billy Graham
disagree.
Association pull all their banking away from Wells Fargo Bank because Wells Fargo Bank ran a TV commercial that had a same-sex couple in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved their banking to, and I forget the name of the bank, a bank in South Carolina. Ironically, which one of their branches has sponsored gay pride parades. But he didn't know that, so he might be in trouble there too.
He's out of the frying pan and into the gay nightclub.
He also posted the message on Facebook, which is an extremely pro-LGBT rights company.
So he really needs to get off Facebook.
No doubt he probably uses an Apple product or two, an extremely pro-gay rights company. He might shop at Target stores. He might. There's nowhere you can go,
Yeah.
Right?
Because the tide is so completely in the direction of this is a civil right, and if we're a corporate citizen, we have to be in line with the new
these
civil
corporations
rights.
are ultimately thinking about their bottom line, that it's in their best interest financially to be inclusive. So
Yes,
there you go.
right.
So has he spoken since this? Has
I don't
people
think
pointed
so.
out some of the hypocrisy in his
I
statement?
haven't seen anything else that he said. I think the irony is, for me, though, what about the crass consumerism that's being crammed down our throats by virtually every company
But that's
in America?
biblical.
Well, it's American.
I just don't understand how anybody can think that that is a loving response, to people that aren't following, whatever we think, the Bible says, or what it does say. I mean, what I don't understand is, ultimately we are called to love Christ and love others that don't love Him or follow Him, right? And why do we expect non-Christians, non-believers to behave and act like Christians?
Right. And what about the Bible's call to love our neighbors?
Right.
If we're just going to withdraw.
That doesn't mean you do business with them.
Well, okay, how about this? Does he still think that Christians should serve in the military, given that the military now accepts gay and lesbian soldiers?
Oh, man.
Or should Christians still pay taxes to a government that won't imprison or execute gay people?
Other pro-LGBT companies, as ranked by a company that does that, they rank, or a service that does that, ranks companies on their LGBT friendliness. So if you're a Christian, we need to avoid Target, Starbucks, Levi's, Microsoft, Amazon, Ford, Home Depot, Expedia,
Oh, my word.
Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, Gap, Oreo, Macy's, Old Navy, Banana Republic, General Mills, JCPenney, Walgreens, Nike, Ben & Jerry's, Google, eBay, Orbitz, JetBlue, MasterCard, Johnson & Johnson, Goldman Sachs, Cisco, Marriott, UBS. Those are just a few that have hit the highest rating.
I'm going to give one ding for all of them.
LGBT friendliness.
And Disney's not even listed on there.
I can't figure out what happened to Franklin, because this isn't something his dad would have done.
No. Well, he's done a lot of things his dad wouldn't have done.
I don't. Is he just more reactionary? Is he just more of a fighting personality?
You know what's interesting is he's more of a crazy uncle than his dad, who's in his 90s.
I know.
Well, perhaps we shouldn't go down the road of dissecting Mr. Graham, and especially since he's not here.
Next one. If he was here, then we could dissect
Yes. Maybe we
He
should.
could defend himself. But that's why I was asking, has he said anything since these statements? Because
Not that I've seen.
Because it seems like somebody would have pointed out a little bit of the impossibility of
craziness. I also wonder, though, if the Billy Graham Association, the BGEA, Evangelistic Association, has become a little more parochial, a little more, regionally specific. Because when he started, he went to school, Wheaton College. The Billy Graham Association was founded in Minneapolis, so it was more, it was more exposed to, and he traveled all over the place. He's spoken. His first big rally was in L.A.
Right.
His next big crusade was in New York. And then he was in Washington D.C. all the time with presidents. I wonder if Franklin has grown up a little more isolated, a little more in a bubble with less exposure to differing opinions. I don't know.
Well,
Tony Campolo.
okay.
Tony Campolo is not Franklin Graham.
No, and he's always been sort of on the edge of the liberal Christian evangelical
He
bubble.
would be considered a progressive
He is a progressive,
evangelical.
yes. He wrote the Red Letter Bibles, actually, which got a lot of heat way back when.
So he, on June 8th, came out and made a statement urging the church to be more welcoming. He said, I place my highest priority in the words of Jesus, emphasizing the 25th chapter of Matthew, where Jesus makes clear that on Judgment Day, the defining question will be how each of us responded to those he calls the least of these. It has taken countless hours of prayer, study, conversation, and emotional turmoil to bring me to the place where I am finally ready to call for the full acceptance of Christian gay couples into the church. And now he explains how he came to this position. What is the point of marriage in the first place? That's a big question.
There's a lot of answers to that.
No. His answer is, we believe that God intends married partners to help actualize in each other the fruits of the Spirit.
Wait a second. Let's go.
Often citing the Apostle Paul's comparison of marriage to Christ's sanctifying relationship with the church.
That is true, but what do you do about Genesis?
So the purpose of marriage is to sanctify one another.
That's a purpose.
He says, I have come to know so many gay Christian couples whose relationships work in much the same way as my own. Our friendships with these couples have helped me understand how important it is for the exclusion and disapproval of their unions by the Christian community to end. We in the church should actively support such families. Furthermore, we should be doing all we can to reach, inform, and include all those precious children of God who have been wrongly led to believe that they are mistakes or just not good enough for God simply because they are not straight.
I do agree with that.
When we sing the old invitation hymn, Just As I Am, I want us to mean it, and I want my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters to know it is true for them too. He says, I'm old enough to remember when we in the church made strong biblical cases for keeping women out of teaching roles, and when divorced and remarried people often were excluded from fellowship altogether on the basis of Scripture. Not long before that, some Christians even made biblical cases supporting slavery. Many of those people were sincere believers, but most of us now agree that they were wrong. I'm afraid we are making the same kind of mistake again, which is why I am speaking out.
a
So
lot
to
respond to.
On a pastoral level, I think the right now it seems like the big
You can say this because you're a pastor.
Well, technically. Right now, the big question seems to be a doctrinal one, which is what is the definition of marriage, and can Christians of the same gender be married? And all that. And fine, those are important questions. But on some level, and very soon, if not already, pastors are going to start dealing with a practical rather than a theoretical question. What do you do when a person becomes a believer who's, 35, 40 years old, and they are already part of a same-sex marriage, and they already have children? And so it isn't a matter of will I or will I not marry a same-sex couple, or do I believe that to be sanctioned? What are we going to do with the people who are already in those relationships, who then come to our church? They want to be part members, or they want to come to Christ, or they want to be baptized, or they want their children, whatever. It becomes a much different question than just
right.
Because the cat's out of the bag at this point.
Can I teach Sunday school in your church?
Right, and
Decide.
so that's where it gets a lot more gray, no matter where you come down on the actual theology of the whole thing.
I guess what surprised me about Campolo's statement is that he didn't offer any exegetical explanation. There was no, here's how I now interpret these passages in Scripture. There was just, we've been wrong about other stuff too.
That's as close as he got.
And his first argument is, now that I know gay people, which is always a dangerous. I mean,
It's the one I hear the most.
is it? Now that I know bank robbers, I'm having a hard time saying bank robbing is wrong.
Are you equating? Being
Yeah,
gay
that's a
with being
bad. I
bank
would
robber?
stop right
I'd walk that
there.
one back.
I
Man.
would too, Phil.
The point being, you can't just say the behavior must be correct because I know people who do it.
Right. Well, it's a little bit. Here's a better, I think, analogy would be saying.
Thank you, Scott.
I used to think Hinduism was wrong, but now I've met Hindus, and they're very nice, wonderful people.
Right.
Therefore, Hinduism must be correct. That's a little different.
Right.
You can love and care for and find very good, virtuous people who still hold beliefs that you think are inconsistent with the Christian gospel.
Right.
Those things are not
Right.
mutually exclusive.
Right. Now that I know polygamists, how could I think polygamy is wrong? Well, that's not logical.
Well, and isn't it possible to bifurcate this discussion? Basically saying that
Like I bifurcated my
theologically,
big Turk.
theologically, the Bible tells us that one of the main purposes of marriage is for procreation, and so the woman is a helpmeet for the man. And theologically, marriage is between a man and a woman, and for the purpose of creating children. But politically and in the public square, marriage can be what it can be. What the government says it can be.
I think what you're getting at is, frankly, over the last number of centuries, we've, as a culture, redefined marriage numerous times. And it will continue to be redefined. That's just the nature of culture. The issue is, what does Christian scripture, doctrine, and orthodoxy over history say about Christian marriage? And yeah, that's always up for interpretation too, but for the most part, it has been very consistent for 2,000 years what the Christian view of marriage is. Now, what I would argue is that even the evangelical church has radically redefined marriage over the last 100 years in the United States. And the next logical step then is to redefine it further along the lines of same-sex marriage. So yeah, it's going to continue to change in the culture. The question is, what is the Christian doctrine and sacrament of marriage, and what has it always been? And that's what I think we have to differentiate.
Then Tim Keller jumps in.
Keller.
It's his turn.
Okay.
And by the way, no, I was not comparing. I was not making a direct comparison between bank robbery and homosexuality. It was a comparison to the notion that something that you believe on principle is wrong does not become right simply because you meet a nice person who goes against that principle. The Bible and Same-Sex Relationships, a review article. Tim Keller reviewed 2 books, the 2 primary books that are promoting an evangelical acceptance of homosexuality. And Tim Keller is, theologically, he's Orthodox. He's in Manhattan. He's conservative on some issues, but he wouldn't be considered overall a wildly conservative evangelical. Correct?
I would say he's very orthodox in his theology. He's Reformed. He's Presbyterian. He's certainly not politically conservative. He's never been a political voice in any way. But conservative and progressive all depend on where your point of view is from. For an awful lot of our culture, he's going to be considered conservative.
Okay. So he wrote a review of the 2 most read volumes taking a pro-gay rights position in the evangelical world, those written by Matthew Vines and Ken Wilson. He says, I see 6 basic arguments that these books and others like them make. Argument number 1, knowing gay people personally. These people were brought to a change of mind through getting to know gay people personally. When I see people discarding their older beliefs that homosexuality is sinful after engaging with loving, wise gay people, I'm inclined to agree that those earlier beliefs were likely defective. In fact, they must have been essentially a form of bigotry. So I say good riddance to bigotry. However, the reality of bigotry cannot itself prove that the Bible never forbids homosexuality. So just because you met someone that is nice and virtuous doesn't mean the Bible has not forbidden
It's not
a behavior.
Right.
Second argument is consulting historical scholarship. Vines and Wilson both claim that scholarly research into the historical background show that biblical authors were not forbidding all same-sex relationships, but only exploitative ones. pederasty, prostitution, and rape. Their argument is that Paul and other biblical writers had no concept of an innate homosexual orientation, that they only knew of exploitative homosexual practices and therefore had no concept of mutual, loving, same-sex relationships. And I've heard this argument multiple times.
I don't get that at all.
So what they're saying is the Bible, yes, it does forbid homosexuality, but
only the kind that they had back then.
Right. In the ancient world, they didn't have any understanding that there was a homosexual orientation to sexuality and that two adult people could have a mutually loving, accepting relationship as homosexuals.
Okay, well, that is extrapolating a lot of supposition, it sounds like.
So
They're trying to build that based on ancient sources
Yes.
that speak about homosexual activity as a man and a boy or in a non-consensual way, that's what the Bible's forbidding rather than...
Well, when you read Romans, it doesn't say anything about that.
Well, it's an argument from silence.
Keller says these arguments were first asserted in the 1980s by John Boswell and Robin Scroggs. Vine and Wilson and others are essentially repopularizing them. However, they do not seem to be aware that the great preponderance of the best historical scholarship since the 1980s has rejected that assertion. And he gives two very detailed examples of what we would consider modern homosexuality being present and known widely in the ancient world.
You know, Matthew Vines wrote a response to Keller.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to read that next.
It's now going kind of back and forth.
Okay, next point, recategorizing same-sex relations. Many argue that homosexuality should be put in the same category as slavery and segregation. Up until very recently, though, all Christian churches and theologians unanimously read the Bible as condemning homosexuality. By contrast, there was never any consensus or even a majority of churches that thought slavery and segregation were supported by the Bible. And he names one researcher who has shown that even within the segregationist South, efforts to support racial separation from the Bible collapsed within a few years of the Civil Rights Movement. So, in fact, during the Civil War, British Presbyterian biblical scholars told their Southern American colleagues who supported slavery that they were reading the scriptural texts through cultural blinders. So during the Civil War, this is British theologians saying, you guys are reading what you want to read into the Bible. You're looking for evidence for your views that you've already committed to, and they found it. And he's wondering, Keller's wondering, if Vines and folks like him are doing the same thing today, and they have new cultural spectacles on.
In other words, the pro-same-sex marriage voices tend to say to the conservatives, hey, you read the Bible wrong about slavery, and now you're reading it wrong about homosexuality. And ironically, Keller's flipping it back on them and saying, no, actually what you're doing is exactly what the slaveholders in the South did, which is you had your cultural position and read it into the Bible. Similarly, same-sex marriage advocates, you have your cultural position, and you too are reading
Keller's
it into
point of view. So then Keller goes on to say, and this is interesting, he says, so what are those cultural spectacles? What are the spectacles that you're wearing when you look in the Bible and come out with justification for same-sex marriage? He says, the reason that homosexual relationships make so much more sense to people today than in previous times is because they have absorbed late modern Western culture's narratives about the human life. Our society presses its members to believe you have to be yourself, that sexual desires are crucial to personal identity, that any curbing of strong sexual desires leads to psychological damage, and that individuals should be free to live as they alone see fit. So it's the self-definition narrative. It says you should have the right to live as you feel wired to live.
Yeah. And God wants me to be happy and fulfilled, and therefore anything that would be an impediment to that must be outside of God's will.
Next point, that they are, in a sense, he believes, revising biblical authority. Vines argues that while the Levitical Code forbids homosexuality, it also forbids eating shellfish. Yet he say Christians no longer regard eating shellfish as wrong, so why can't we change our minds on homosexuality? Here Vines is rejecting the New Testament understanding that the ceremonial laws of Moses around the sacrificial system and ritual purity were fulfilled in Christ and no longer binding, but that the moral law of the Old Testament is still in force. So there's a categorical decision to say, I think homosexuality is in the category of shellfish, not in the category of murder.
Right.
that it's not moral, it's ritual.
And it doesn't address the issue of the prohibition against homosexuality being repeated in the New Testament.
No, not so much. And then finally, the argument for accepting homosexual behavior is otherwise churches are going to be on the wrong side of history. More explicit in Wilson's volume than Vine's is the common argument that history is moving toward greater freedom and equality for individuals, and so refusing to accept same-sex relationships is a futile attempt to stop inevitable historical development. Wilson says that the complex forces of history showed Christians that they were wrong about slavery, and something like that is now happening with homosexuality. Another historian, however, explains how this idea of inevitable historical progress developed out of the Enlightenment optimism about human nature and reason. It is another place where these writers seem to uncritically adopt background understandings that are foreign to the Bible. In other words, that progress is always higher and better, that always moving forward to a more perfect future. If we believe in the Bible's authority, then shifts in public opinion should not matter. The Christian faith will always be offensive to every culture at some point. And then Keller closes by saying, then we need to wrap it up, that he believes they are missing the biblical vision for marriage. In Genesis 1, he says, you see pairs of different but complementary things made to work together, heaven and earth, sea and land, even God and humanity. It is part of the brilliance of God's creation that diverse, unlike things are made to unite and create dynamic wholes which generate more and more life and beauty through their relationships. As N.T. Wright points out, the creation and uniting of male and female at the end of Genesis 2 is the climax of all of this. That means that male and female have unique, non-interchangeable glories. They each see and do things that the other cannot. Male and female reshape, learn from, and work together. Without understanding this vision, the sexual prohibitions in the Bible make no sense. So that's where he ends up.
Well, it's an interesting difference when you compare Tim Keller and Franklin Graham.
Yes.
In their response to the same issue.
Someone put a whole lot more thought into their response, I'm thinking. I'm not trying to promote one side or the other. I've read some of the stuff trying to explain why the Bible was wrong or the traditional interpretation was wrong, and I haven't, in general, found those arguments very compelling. So I'm currently probably where Tim Keller is, in reasoning. I can't believe Franklin Graham is attempting to take the approach he's taking.
Well, it sounds like to me, if I had to boil it down, that Franklin Graham had an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
It sounds like he has an emotional reaction to being forced into a place where he is uncomfortable and wants to do something about it.
Right.
Whereas...
But I also think, to a certain extent, Tony Campolo is having an emotional reaction.
I agree.
Because he's gotten to know so many gay couples, and he says, I want that to be okay.
Yeah.
But he's not offering arguments.
Right.
Well, to be fair...
Yes.
Who
are we being fair to?
Tim Keller has given a more thoughtful response, but it doesn't mean his opponents are only being emotional. Because I think Matthew Vines, who wrote a response in a whole book that Keller reacted to, but also then wrote a response to Keller, is trying to give a thoughtful response. Now, I too would disagree with his argumentation, but I wouldn't dismiss those who are pro same-sex marriage as merely succumbing to emotion.
But I'm
just
right.
saying.
In these two examples, you're probably right.
Campolo's piece that he wrote, Franklin's response, what he has done, and the thoughtfulness of Keller. And even if you disagree with Keller, I mean, he's doing the work.
Yeah.
He's trying to think it through. And that's brave to be. I mean, think about it. He's got a mega church in Manhattan.
Right.
If there's anyone on earth who should be tempted to give in on this issue to keep your job, it's the pastor of a megachurch in Manhattan with a young congregation of hipsters. That's really tough to take that
and
stand.
I think for at least the people listening to our podcast, this is such an important issue, and it's such a difficult issue that it warrants our best thinking and our best thinkers to engage it, like Keller and others. So I'd encourage everyone, no matter what side you're emotionally inclined toward, to engage the thoughtful, theological, exegetical study of this issue before you just emotionally make a decision one way or another.
And I think reading and learning and having conversations like this in a way that's not antagonistic is super helpful, because we do need to learn how to talk about these issues in a way that builds up, doesn't break down, and leads to, theologically enlightened discussion.
Thank you.
And thinking.
Okay, I got to wrap it up because Luke has to go somewhere. One thing you can say about Tim Keller, he's pretty bright, and boy, he ain't yeller for taking the stand that he took. He spent a lot of time reading the books and thinking through the argument, and it looks like he probably did the most work of the three we're talking about. But Franklin Graham, he may have to stop buying Spam if Hormel sponsors a float in a gay rights parade. Now he's got to eat something else or eat stuff that he made himself in South Carolina. Is he in South Carolina or North Carolina?
Doesn't matter. Just go with it.
I think it's north.
Okay. I think he might need to do some finer thinking about how to reach our neighbors and still stand up for our principles.
Can I just say, the Hormel float at the Gay Pride Parade would be the best float ever.
Is there? I wonder if there's like an underground fanship of Spam in the gay community. Spam seems like something retro that might get really popular again.
Well, good luck to them.
Okay. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.